I'm Bennett Law from the Bethel Library. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you here. We incredibly appreciate the commitment that our legislators make every year to come and visit with us once a month. We're scheduled right now here in February, but in March, April, and May, on the second Monday of the month, at this ungodly hour, 7:30. We all have different opinions about that. Some of us think it's a little late. Some of us are like, 4 in the afternoon would work better for me, but that's all right. So the way this has usually worked, Senator Major, is the legislators take a couple minutes. This would be a good time to let us know what committees you're on, what focus you might have this year. But we try to make sure we leave plenty of time for folks to ask questions about things that are important to them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I only get in the way if someone misbehaves. That was always Dick McCormick in my book. So I don't know where Dick is. He told me he was going to come carry a whip here at these meetings this year. So we'll see if he's able to come.
Well, since I am taking over for Dick, I promise I won't misbehave much. But thank you. My name is Joe Major. I am the freshman senator for Windsor County, with the senior senator here, Allison Clarkson, and Becca White, who will be with us shortly. She's just navigating the weather. We'll be here shortly. I am currently on the vice chair of the Agriculture Committee, and I'm also on the Institutions Committee, as I hear Becca coming in currently. So I'll let her sneak in here real quick. I don't think it's any secret that the predominant issue right now is education, and in particular how it affects property taxes. We in both the House and the Senate are going over what the governor has proposed initially. There are some things that we need to find out and get into detail about. But as a whole, the legislature is focused on that. Now, there are a number of issues, and I'm sure that you're going to ask about them through the next hour or so, and we'll be more than happy. But for me, that seems, and on the campaign trail and in the legislature, that seems to be the predominant issue going on right now. So I will go to.
Senator should go, I think.
Should, okay. Good morning, crowd. Good to see you all, the Bethel faithful here. It's just, and Bennett, thank you. I just want to say, I have been in the Senate. I've had the honor of representing Windsor County and the Windsor District for 8 years. This is my 9th year. This is my first Bethel morning without Dick.
I know.
And so I'd just like to take a moment for us to thank Dick. Dick served this community and this county and the state so well, so articulately, so thoughtfully for so many years. 36 years. And that's a huge public service gift to our state. So thank you, Dick, and we miss you, and it's wonderful to have Joe, and it's been a great passing of the torch. But I just, it's my first Bethel morning without Dick. So I just have to acknowledge that. I'm Allison Clarkson. I live in Woodstock. I have just finished a term of serving you as the majority leader in the Senate for 4 years. I now serve as the chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. And in that capacity, am addressing the other huge crisis that we have, in addition to really thinking outside the box in terms of our education delivery and funding system. We also desperately need more housing and need to be clever about how to address low-hanging fruit and how to do things affordably, because there isn't that lovely pot of COVID and ARPA money left. So that we're in the capacity of, and I serve in the afternoon on Senate Government Operations with Bethel. And where we continue to work on a whole host of issues, from licensing to resiliency to public safety. So that's just an introduction. Take it, Becca or Kurt.
The question was just introduction?
Yeah, just introductions.
So to what committees are you on this time, and what,
Yeah.
what's your primary concern, I think?
Well, I immediately bit into a muffin as soon as
Maybe your primary concern is
it's breakfast.
breakfast.
I'm Becca White. I serve in the Senate. I'm actually no longer your junior senator because we have Joe, so that's kind of exciting for me. And I serve in the morning on transportation. I'm the vice chair. And that has been a goal of mine for the last 6 years since I've been serving in the State House. So I'm very happy to be on transportation, and I'm hoping that kind of opens a little bit more of the door to Windsor County having a place to talk about our transportation needs, which are relatively unique compared to other parts of the state. Then in the afternoon, I get to serve with Allison on government operations. I used to serve on my select board, so I bring a lot of that local government work with me to that role. Sounds like Joe talked about our number one issue, which is public education and financing public education. We've had already a lot of conversations in the State House related to the governor's objectives and what he would like to see. And while he's focusing primarily on how do we reform our education system, I'm primarily interested in how do we fund our education system and how is it equitably distributed cost-wise. And one of the key things that we're going to be working on this year is trying to break out the categories of non-homestead tax rates so that second homeowners, not just primary residents, are carrying the bulk of the cost of those systems. It's been kind of a cultural thing in Vermont that we haven't really touched that group of people to the same extent that we have with our homestead rate for full-time residents, and I think that's time that we change that. So the other key issue that hasn't been touched on yet is climate change. It was interesting to go from 3 years ago when the biggest topic was flooding, how do we respond to flooding, to then property taxes. I think they're very interconnected in many ways, but to respond to our increased natural disasters, our lack of food resiliency with our systems being so fragile. Just one series of drought can take out a whole area of crop, and then we don't have apples at the time we expect them. You know, there's all, or freeze in the terms of apples with the buds. So there's lots of areas that we can improve on when it comes to climate resiliency. And the last thing I'll say is we're doing that all in spite of a new administration that has identified federal funding of all kinds as being bad. And unfortunately, as a state, we are extremely reliant on federal funds. The majority of our budget comes from federal dollars.
No, a third.
A third of our, well, okay, I think transportation, which is 2/3.
Hugely in transportation, hugely in labor. 90% of our Department of Labor is funded by federal money. Huge numbers of our grants and programs are, but a third of our state budget is.
So a big part of our budget is federally funded. So that means state dollars are going to be in shorter supply to shore up programs that we love and need at the same time that we're working to try to lower costs. So that's going to be an interesting challenge and certainly one that we are working on. So.
And if I could just tag on to it, because I wrote my article actually this week on this issue, but I think Kurt will agree because it's an economic development issue, and Kirk and I share that jurisdiction in the House and the Senate. Our whole food and forestry world is totally dependent on a set of workers who are under threat.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And so, in addition to denying funding of many of our programs, we have a workforce, our undocumented workforce, that supply our food, most of our food, and certainly our dairy and a lot of our lumber work. are all terrified at the moment and are not showing up for work. I mean, across the country. I have a friend who's at university in California, and she said the fields are empty. People just not going to work. The same is going to be true in our dairy industry. We desperately need to reform our immigration system because we desperately need those workers because we do not have Americans who are willing to do those jobs. So that's also an issue that we face right now.
As vice chair of the Agriculture Committee, I'm hearing from farmers that are saying that they cannot do the job that and they're worried about their farms. They're literally worried about being able to have their farms going forward. And I will also say this, at least here in Vermont, both Democrat and Republicans are worried about this. So it is a bipartisan problem, an issue that we are worried about. So we hope to have the chair of the Agriculture Committee is a Republican, and he is in favor of trying to fix this problem on a state level. So we will look at a bill to try to do that as well. So I'm sorry, Kurt.
Oh, no problem. Part of the curse and the joy of going last is that a lot of the best topics have already been mentioned. I'm Kirk White, and I am the ranking member of the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. Ranking member means you're just the number one volunteer. And so I serve on that committee. As a reminder to folks, senators serve on 2 committees. In the House, we only serve on 1. So I'm all just commerce and economic development. Certainly, indeed, the issues that senators have brought up are the big ones that are taking up all the attention in the House side as well. We also we had to pass the Budget Adjustment Act out to adjust, every halfway through the year, the budget that was passed that went into effect July 1st has to be looked at to decide what do we, did we underestimate what this was going to cost? Did we overestimate? And so some money gets shifted around. And so we've been in the House, that was a thing we just did a bunch of, and now we're looking at the budget already. My committee in large part, we're economic development, so we're looking at things that have to do with economic development, and we're meeting with a number of other committees. This is a thing that seems pretty new in my side of is that there are a lot of joint hearings between committees because we recognize that these are issues that cross jurisdictions. So my committee has met with the Education Committee because we're economic development and the whole issue around teachers and also how does the governor's plan for education impact career and tech education, which seems to be a thing that's going to be a sticking point in there because it doesn't look like it's going to be good for that.
Or solve its problems.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we work on that component. Last week and this coming week we were working with the housing. On our side, it's housing and general affairs, and some of that is looking at worker housing. And how do we incentivize more worker houses or houses of any kind? Because people have continued to report that I found someone to work for my company, which has been sometimes a problem. They couldn't even find a worker. I found somebody, they're from out of state, and they can't find a place to live, so they can't take the job. And so what do we do to remove obstacles to housing? How do we incentivize housing? How do we do that? There's a
a proposal from the governor that's called Spark, and if later I may talk about that, but it's basically it's a rural tax increment financing system, and there's some pros and cons to that, and so we've been looking into all that stuff. And if you want to get into the weeds of tax increment financing,
Mini tiffs.
late some night when you're having some insomnia, I'm happy to have that conversation with you.
It's fun.
But it's critically important as we look at housing, because most of our small village centers, which are perfectly designed for growth, we want to do smart growth housing. We want to develop, keep our backcountry, and really make more efficient use of our downtowns and village centers. And we can't do that in many of our downtowns and village centers because they don't have water and sewer. So this is an idea where we could really do much smaller infrastructure investment in a way that makes a lot of sense. So I think we're going to see something, and actually there's some great other ideas about how to do that. So I'm looking forward. But you didn't mention our joint hearing, because we had a small business Wednesday together, which was incredibly useful to identify issues that small business need to have addressed this year. Well, always need to have addressed. So things like workforce, things like healthcare, things like access to capital. Because we have great supports for entrepreneurship and getting things going, but then they hit a moment of growth and they don't have access to the capital to help them grow. So there are a lot of issues that are coming out of that. But our staff, we don't have a lot of staff in the State House. As you know, none of us have personal staff. And so we're trying to be very efficient about our hearings with the limited staff that we have, so that everybody isn't doing the same thing in 2 different committees 4 times. So anyway, that's a good tee up. Would you like to, I mean, questions are in some ways the best. I sadly have a meeting. I have to leave for it about 8:45. So I don't know. Our thoughts are generally that we go till 9, right?
Jump right in, sir. They welcome your questions. They may rethink that in about 90 seconds.
Do you mind saying your name and stuff?
Dave A.
Yeah.
You said something about figuring out the funding and then maybe reforming education. I think you're going at it backwards. I think you gotta reform it first so you know what you have to fund.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were keeping. Is that the end of your comment?
That's the end of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, there's more.
Oh, keep going. Yeah.
No, but let's.
Well, Dave has served on the school board.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I have 13 years on the school board. I'm
Yeah.
now on my 8th year on the select board. So I'm aware of what's going on around here anyway. But anyway, if you fund what we have and then you reform it, maybe you don't have the money you need to do that, and maybe you have too much.
Oh yeah.
And I can tell you right now from my experience, if there's too much money, they spend it anyway.
Yeah, I would say my comment was because I don't serve on education committee.
Yeah,
So the majority of the work is looking at, like, the governor's main proposal. He did invite the tax commissioner, but the majority of it was reforming. So I'm personally, as an individual, looking at that financing more, because there's a lot of time and energy being spent on the educational reform side. I don't disagree with your process of events. It just so happens that that's the niche that I can fill as an individual in the Senate. But you're right, like, chronologically, that is how you should do it. Yeah.
So how?
But we can talk, do you want to talk about the governor's proposal, or is
Well,
that?
I think that we don't have enough time to just start talking about that. I mean, you go from 64 to 5, that's crazy. You go down to 24,
Well,
25.
But also, Dave, as you know, it's very early days. I mean,
I understand
and so that is part of our challenge, the 4 of us. At the moment, the plan isn't even fully articulated yet. The plan isn't yet fully in bill form yet. The plan keeps getting rolled out. As you know, there was a huge surprise Thursday about school choice statewide. So I think, I have to say though, on the positive side, I've served in the legislature. This is my 21st year. I have never come into the legislature with so much openness, all legislators being open and willing to address education delivery model and funding model. And I would say that is really what we're looking at, is delivery, how it's best delivered, how we can get the best results with the best quality education for a sustainable amount of money.
So I'm gonna just throw in one thing.
Yeah,
and you-
so that, I just wanted to
on
say
the
that.
education committee, but I think this going down the road with, we're gonna voucher kids and they can go here, there, wherever, is gonna kill Vermont education.
Agreed.
So, yeah,
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
we knew it right in this town. We had a place down the road who had less restrictions. They could take whoever they wanted, and unfortunately, they picked the cream of the crop.
yeah.
And the schools in the area, their top students were gone.
I would almost say it's a non-starter for our
I hope
caucus.
so.
There is only so much money, and there will only be so much money, public money. And my position has always been that public money should go to public schools.
Yep, here, here.
And that's it. Yeah, both Allison and I have come from a system in New York, specifically Western New York, where we both went to either public or religious schools, and excuse me, private or religious schools, and our parents had to pay for that. The public money went to public schools, depending on the municipality that you were in. And my feeling has always been that, because if you take that money, no matter how small, from public funding, you are taking it from public schools. And so for me, as an individual senator that's been in the Senate for about 5 minutes, that's a non-starter for me.
Just to, as you know, Dave, because you know this system pretty fully, we have at the moment about 77,000 kids that are currently being educated. About just under 4,000 are tuitioned for one reason or another to live in towns that have that as an option. We've seen many of our towns in the Senate. We see many of our towns' elementary educations getting hemorrhaged to pay for tuition for the high school, middle, and high school kids. That's a challenge too, as tuitions have gone up. So anyway, it's going to be a big discussion. I think when you talk about doing governance first and reforming how we deliver first, I think that's what you're suggesting we should be doing first. But I will say that the challenge is that the public, as we heard it campaigning, and as we felt it paying our property tax bill, I live in Woodstock, my property taxes went up 30%. It was a big lift. That was tough. And what we're hearing that they want immediate relief from is the money. That is going to be a challenge, because you're absolutely right. You need to design a system and then figure out how you're going to pay for it. So I think,
in your head, okay, I've only got $10 to redesign the system.
right. But I think that's our challenge, is that I think you're right. I think the delivery needs to be figured out first, and then the money. But we may not have the luxury. We may have to do a stopgap measure, and I'm open to stopgaps as long as it's just for a year or two, while we finish out the long runway of how we redesign the delivery system.
Okay, so with that, and I don't mean, if anybody wants me to shut up, just tell me.
No, it's a big issue.
If you're going to, you know, the big elephant that I see is healthcare, because I see.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean,
We haven't even talked about
I
health.
negotiated union contracts with the school. In the select board, we just see, I mean, the holy crap. What would cost to give healthcare insurance to our employees is crazy.
Well, that 16.4% increase last year alone.
Yeah, but like it was 12 point something year before.
Yeah.
And it's been double digits for years. Now, how many people's income went up double digits?
Didn't yours, Dave?
I'm on Social Security.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah, none of us, no one.
Yeah,
Maybe
2.5%.
Elon Musk's went up that much,
Well, there are a few who had that. They
but
didn't-
not us.
They didn't share.
But to your question, none of us serve on healthcare,
I know.
and so
Or
that's-
education.
or education.
I'm hoping to
And
bring it back and say, hey, this old guy in Bethel thinks you ought to think about.
We will start our.
We're right with you, Dave. Yeah.
But I did just want to note that there is a lot of work being done on healthcare.
You want to talk about your bill?
Yes, that was kind of where I was going. She's read my mind.
That we've
There's-
signed on to.
Yes, that they've signed on to. There's 2 bills that I've been working on. The first is a community nurse pilot program. Did that last year. There's a community nurse in Sharon. Now Hartford has a really great way to proactively stop long-term, large cost situations. You know, when you have someone who doesn't necessarily have the right ability to take their prescriptions, or a community nurse comes and sees, oh, the front steps are unmanageable. No wonder this person isn't accessing the services they need, or is at a fall risk. All sorts of good things community nurses can lower costs on. So working on that again, and ideally giving access to towns who don't have the municipal budget, like wonderful towns like Norwich or Hartford do, to fund a community nurse, give them the ability to start those programs, to see the benefits, and then make a case individually moving forward. Then the second bill is something called reference-based pricing, and a reference-based pricing model. That means, very succinctly, that the providers, their starting negotiation point with the health insurer is the Medicare reimbursement rate. So they can't say that their starting negotiation price for any service is that point. They will not go higher than that. So if you think about it, if you're getting a surgery and one person over here it costs $2,000 because they're on Medicare, and the other person it costs $6,000 because they're on private insurance, those surgeries in reality should cost the same amount of money. The same service is being provided. So the idea is that will lower costs. Obviously, providers not super jazzed about this idea because they have cost shifted a lot of things that Medicare and Medicaid have brought down. They've cost shifted that to private insurance and state and public insurance, for example. So the hope is with this bill that we get the conversation going. Great report by the auditor on this, where it could save us like billions of dollars, supposedly nationally, and millions here in the state, to start the process of having state employees use reference-based pricing as a model. And I hope that that will help. And that's teachers, that's state employees. So the hope is that conversation will put out some savings, but obviously UVM Medical Center lobbyists for any large provider are going to show up in force and say, no, don't do that. So yeah, those are the 2 big bills I'm working on.
Too few people are getting advantage of a very large bottom line.
You have the best quote so far today. Like,
Okay.
Question on that, Becca. I'm curious if.
And Rebecca, do you guys know
Yes.
each other? But
Oh, yeah.
Joe may not
Rebecca's
know
know
you.
each other, actually.
Have you met Rebecca?
Nice
Hi,
to meet you.
Rebecca. Nice
Rebecca,
to meet you as
same
well.
Video.
One of our,
I'm curious whether that or any other initiative includes any effort at price transparency with medical billing, which I see as a huge problem. A really quick anecdote. I was at the hospital for routine checkup the other day, and the doctor gave me a choice and said, you're reaching a certain age, you could get an ultrasound and just make sure everything's fine on this. And my first reaction was, sure, why not? And then I stopped and asked, what would that actually change? Would it do anything? And she said, no, actually it wouldn't. We'd still continue the same process. There was no serious risk. And then I thought, how many thousands of dollars would that ultrasound have been if I had just said yes? And
but did you ask her how much it would cost?
I didn't, and I know it's
So they can't tell you.
Yeah.
What's interesting is when you ask a doctor, well, and so how much does that cost? They have no clue.
Right, and I'm sure they don't. There was another time years ago I actually dug into medical billing for an error and learned the coding systems, and it was something like $10 for a box of tissues, and I was kind of blown away. And I know it's complicated because the reimbursement rates are all different. They can't just tell me what it will cost, but that seems like a huge piece of the problem to me.
You're exactly right. Price transparency is something that I know Martine had a bill on we had a senator who had a bill specifically on this last session, and I don't know how it got incorporated, but I'm going to take that back as a question.
Yeah.
I would say one other thing that has come up is medical debt. Many Vermonters experience medical debt, and we did just put forward a bill that uses $1 million to leverage around $100 million of medical debt purchasing. So $100 million of Vermonter medical debt, usually because you don't know how much something is going to cost, that will get wiped away using leveraging $1 million of funding. So
This is the
that's-
treasurer's proposal. It's not ours. I mean, the treasurer is the one who
But-
came forward with this. He's asked us to put it into a bill, but it's,
Ginny Lyons
Yeah.
is the lead sponsor.
yeah, Jenny's, and we're all on it, as far as I can tell.
And you can ask for an itemized bill. I found that worked actually really well. My mom had some services, and we were like, how the heck did this cost that much? And then we asked for an itemized bill, and suddenly the amount was lower.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Just saying.
You know, that's something every one of us could do.
No, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
mean to say you should be your own solution, because we need a systemic solution.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That's
like,
what I'm saying.
that's where I'm at.
And in this case, it wouldn't have cost me, actually, it would have been all insurance billing. My husband works for the state, so that's partly why
But-
I almost said, sure, why not? But I think we all need to get into the habit of questioning these things before we say yes. But we do need those systemic solutions.
I'm gonna ask
Why
about
can't
that.
every bill be itemized? Why can't
God forbid.
there be some price transparency as a blanket rule?
Well,
a
yeah,
good-
And
I
your
was,
physicians, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead,
no, go.
Allison.
Yeah.
And your physicians don't know.
Right.
And they're just trying to take care of you.
Exactly.
And because a very similar thing happened to me. I happened to take iron because I was anemic at one point, and I continued to take iron. And my primary physician said, well, you know, your blood level has leveled out, so you know, let's test you to see if you need it, need to continue to take iron. And I took the test, not knowing, and $350 later, in addition to, because it was not covered under my annual physical, I went, whoa. So transparency is absolutely needed. And then, you know, I was torn and very upset, because I'm like, well, did my primary physician know? And through this process found out they really don't. They're just trying to care for you.
Yeah.
yep.
Joe, does the legislature have any role in this hospital restructuring that's apparently going on or being considered statewide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
It's in front of both healthcare committees, House and Senate.
And like, in what format? You're gonna pass a law that says you can't touch Gifford Hospital? It's not clear.
I'm not sure it's clear to us
Yes.
yet. Bennett, in all fairness, it's with the Green Mountain Care Board. That's the where this, and I don't know who acts first, whether the Green Mountain Care Board act. Do you know, Kurt? I'm not sure which comes first on that, but I know that we'll have a role in it in some capacity. So we can find out for next month and be.
Does the care board have a timeline? Have they given you any information?
We don't serve on healthcare, so I don't know. I don't know what the time frame is.
But I think we should, I think you're all actually, it's very interesting that healthcare has kind of come up as a key
Well,
topic
it's
here,
huge.
because we certainly have felt the lack of having someone on healthcare in the past. I feel like we should follow up with Mike Fisher, who is our healthcare advocate, because unfortunately, we're probably all in the same boat of our comments will be equally considered to the Green Mountain Care Board. And if they have a process for hearing concerns, it would be good to share that out with folks. The other one, Bennett, to your question around hospital restructuring, they're supposed to come up with a plan and present it to us, is my understanding. And they came out with some kind of identified solutions in that giant report, not the pinkest
Wyman.
Wyman report. And the reaction to it was so negative.
Visceral.
Yeah, that I would say that the forward trajectory of some of those suggestions has stalled. Like Springfield Hospital, I know Senator Clarkson has been really good and has gone to like every breakfast hospital stakeholder engagement meeting during the 9 to 5 hours Monday through Friday. But I don't know if they had told you if they had to move forward with any of the suggestions.
I'm not clear on the time frame, Bennett, but I do know that there are some real issues with that report, with the Wyman report, and I mean, I have taken real issue with it, and I know a number of us have. So, I mean, Springfield Hospital alone is a great example. I mean, it, as you know, almost went bankrupt, and it has had a major restructuring, and I feel like they've been given no credit for the
Yeah.
restructuring that they underwent, and they are so not doing business as usual. They have upended and rethought absolutely everything, and so for them to have been sort of brushed with the same strokes that others, it just seems completely unfair. So, but we'll find out. I think this is a good reminder that for us to get up to date on our healthcare.
I don't know if you two signed on to it, but I did sign on to the Don't Pay Hospital Executives Bonuses Bill, which you may have heard the UVM Medical Center, their director received a $300,000 bonus, is my understanding. And when asked, could you have not taken the bonus? He essentially said, well, yeah, I could have not taken the bonus, but we decided it was good. It was an okay move. And I think that shows the juxtaposition of where we're at, where they were cutting a psychiatric unit that is foundational to the care of hundreds of people, while one individual is receiving a $300,000 bonus. Like that, the system is
So broken.
Issues, yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. So. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay,
Dave came prepared, as he always does.
talking about the undocumented workers in the farms, I grew up on a farm, so I understand. What I don't understand is, or what I don't like is the fact that we can't keep our family farms, and you can't farm unless you're really huge, or you're 17th generation, so you don't have a lot of debt. But my question out of this is, why are they undocumented? What
Because we have a broken immigration system.
Okay, so how, I just had dinner with some folks yesterday who came from Italy. And they came as young adults. And they went through El Asylum. And they became documented, and they're here, and they're being very productive in the United States.
Yeah, they came to when we had a
Yes.
actually good functioning immigration system.
So,
We may want to
it makes the news about all these undocumented people, but when you start talking reforming the immigration, well, we want to do, let's do the first things first.
Exactly.
Then we'll take care of this, because the big farm around here is up in Brookfield. And I stopped up there just because of curiosity. I mean, they milk 21 hours a day.
How many cows do they have, Dave?
700.
700, yeah. It's a big
And they're
farm.
small. They're tiny.
Yeah, they're small, because there's some that have
In today's world.
1,300.
But the point being, I had to find the one immigrant that spoke English, so I could ask him a question. The rest of them, they don't.
Right.
I have no problem with them coming here and work, but the whole thing about, I'm getting off track here, but we're talking about, well, illegal immigrants or immigrants. They're two different groups of people.
Well,
They are two different, because
they're all people who want to work here and earn a living.
let's make it so they can be legal.
But
Let's figure it out.
we can't do that. That is a federal government thing, and we have been asking for decades to do that. But our federal immigration system has been broken for far too long.
So when you see Bernie next time, give him a kick. Say, hey,
Well,
what
you do the
hell?
same thing. You'll probably see him before we do.
Can I just add one thing, which is I want to be really clear about the language we use around the status of these
Yes.
folks, because almost almost all of our farm workers are documented.
Yeah.
They have a visa that they have for seasonal work. The issue that we're experiencing right now is that many of those folks, although they have a seasonal work visa, they might have brought, I don't know, a family member with them for like
The whole
this,
family.
or the whole family. Or they themselves are concerned that even with proper documentation, they still don't want to go out because they're concerned that they will be targeted and then ejected from the country. Like, there's all sorts of nuances to this, and I want to be very clear. We have almost no fully undocumented farm workers. We have almost no fully undocumented farm workers. These are folks who went through a process, They are not citizens. That's a very clear difference. They're not citizens, so they also don't get the same worker protections that people who are citizens get. So they can be paid a lower amount. They don't have the same benefits that are required of them, and they also don't have the same workplace safety requirements in some situations. So the cost of employing them is much lower. So I would be very clear that it's not folks who are, why can't they follow a process, why can't they do it? Most of them have done a lot of paperwork to get here, or their employer has done a lot of paperwork to get them here. And then they're still concerned that working here for a lower wage is putting them at risk of being deported or being sent out. And at the same time, there's fewer and fewer visa allocations being allowed.
Only 66,000. But honestly, our dairy farmers, does not happen with our dairy farmers. This is fruit and vegetables get H2 or H1B visas for very limited crop harvesting. But you want to talk about the dairy farmers because most of them are not are not here on a visa program.
Yeah, I want to go to your analogy for a second. You said you had an Italian friend.
Okay.
Being a European and coming over is quite a bit different than coming from the southern border. And our current administration has been very, let's just say, fervent in trying to stop that situation. I will also say this, and this is the thing that if you do these mass deportations that are being talked about, if you did that, our economy would go in the tank.
Oh, yeah.
Our absolute economy would go in the tank because unfortunately, and this is very true, the workers that are on these farms, how much do you think that your fruits and vegetables and milk would go up if you didn't have these workers to do this work?
And meat. I mean, just think of the chicken factories.
Absolutely. So
South.
it is a system that has, as Senator Clarkson said, for years has been trying to figure out. And as a matter of fact, the thing that really probably upsets me on a federal level is during the Obama administration, they tried to figure it out and they couldn't do it. Just recently, right before the election, the Democrats gave the Republicans just about everything that they wanted to get to try to come up with a system, and it couldn't be done. Or it could have been done, but it was told to stop.
There was political intervention.
Yes.
Sadly, we were on the brink of an immigration solution, and it got politically hijacked.
And I'm sorry.
Just one
Yeah.
comment. I hate the problem with politics.
Yeah.
Well,
You and us both.
Yeah.
I support a different political party than you folks. It is non-politician.
That's not party day.
You're-
You're here with us. That means you're not non-politician. It means you are engaged with the political system, and we applaud you for that.
well,
But the point being.
no, I understand what you're trying to say.
Because we've had some people in town that, if you are this party, I don't care if you're a
Yep.
murderer or who you
Yep.
are, I'm gonna vote for you.
Yep.
And no, I'm serious.
No.
This person would, if you were a certain party, you got that person's vote. Period. Didn't matter. So I see too much of that.
Yes,
I agree with that.
I agree with that.
And
But
I don't want to get into what the current politics is going on, but I think we've come to a place, and boy, it's really going to get in trouble, where something really drastic is going to happen.
Things are drastic right now. What's happening in the last 3 weeks is drastic.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's really dangerous.
Not good.
okay. So, like I said, I am that person that is probably a bit more optimistic
Oh.
than most. We went through this.
That's why we love you, Joe.
We went through this administration a little more than 4 years ago, and we survived. And I put that in quotation. We went through a civil war, and we survived. We went through economic downturns, tremendous economic downturns, 2008, 1920, and we survived. So call me foolish, and like I said earlier, I've been in the Senate for about 5 minutes, so maybe it hasn't jaded me as of yet. But I am optimistic that we will survive whatever political ramification from the federal level. And you know what? I've been in Vermont since 2018, and I've come to know Vermonters are survivors as well. We will do what we need to do to make things better. And that's me. I got rose-colored glasses on, but I prefer right now to be jaded in that sense than to say, throw my hands up and say that we can't do anything because of a political party. Like I told you earlier, I think more often than not, we work in a bipartisan way. There are some things we're not going to agree on and we'll never agree on. But for the most part, here in Vermont, we can work in a bipartisan way to get things done. And I'm looking forward to doing that going forward.
Yeah, I would say I had the pleasure of attending. I just happened to be in the Cedar Creek room when the Republican senators were doing their press conference for the week 2 weeks ago. And the two things that they called out as concerns that I was like, thank goodness we are all in agreement on these concerns, was immigration reform and particularly our food system. So we are all seeing that. And then trans youth and how we cannot allow LGBTQIA folks to be targeted. So that really grounded me because I was like, that's what the Republicans in the Senate are saying publicly in their press conference in Vermont. And that is very different than what we're hearing on the federal level. So it gives me a lot of hope for Vermont because we at least have some ground rules about how you treat other people and don't make scapegoats out of individual groups who are vulnerable. So that made me feel good.
I want to jump on this theme a little bit. I work with communities all across the country, all across the state on community planning topics, community engagement, and it's been really fascinating to me watching how they've responded and what the challenges are over the different issues in the last few years. And there's one thing that is really concerning to me. Joe, I think I tend to have the same perspective as you most of the time, but in looking at history, there is a big difference that I see right now, and it is that people are no longer reading the same news channels. They are no longer accepting things as facts. They are no longer trusting the same sources, and they no longer have access to solid information. And part of that is, of course, a shift in our news and media culture. Part of it is a shift in us, in people being willing and able and having the time to actually educate themselves and read. And that is the piece that makes me more pessimistic, or at least more afraid, and I'm not sure how we get through it the same way, even as something like the Civil War, if we cannot accept the same thing as facts. And I'm seeing this in these local communities. You know, by way of an example, I recently supported a workshop statewide around communities working on wastewater projects, and some of them are facing intense opposition. And in some communities, that is coming from the left. In other communities, it is coming from the right. Same thing around the debates of whether towns should give up Australian ballot, give up town meeting and move to Australian ballot. In some communities, it's the left saying, we have to do this in support of our values. In other communities, it is the right saying, we have to do this. And all of this tells me that people are abandoning facts for the partisanship. It does not matter what the arguments are and the rationale, it matters who is telling them that is the thing to do. And I would love to see the Senate, the House, state government in some way really focus on ways of getting accessible, balanced information out to people so they can educate themselves. Because I'm seeing this on all the issues you're discussing, just people spouting talking points and positions with no sense of what's real.
If I can say this.
Thank you, Rebecca. You are spot on.
To a certain extent. I would agree with you as far as news sources in it, because we tend to go towards what we believe in. But I would challenge you to pick up a paper from a mainstream newspaper from let's say 30,
Yeah.
and see what they said about African Americans back then.
Yeah.
So, or see what they said about immigrants back then. I say that because I think what most people need to do is to never trust one source, and that has been a predominant thing in all of our news. And we talk, Fox versus MSNBC, or New York Times versus New York Post,
Or the internet.
or the
with opinions that aren't
Yes.
grounded in any fact.
Yes.
I mean, I
Yes.
take a newspaper
No.
any day.
No, that and you're absolutely right. And now that has been opinion is now news, and
Yeah,
whatever opinion,
that's the mistake.
And people don't know the difference. So yes, but I think people have always, what they feel comfortable in is what they want to believe. And so as information warriors, I think we need to go out and bang the drum. You need to go out and bang the drum for what is facts to alternative facts.
So, just to I think, I don't know how many of you heard this news piece the other day on Vermont Public, but it was a frightening number nationally of adults that are literate.
Oh, yeah.
The number of adults in America that are actually functionally literate is just plummeted. And that is, I think, the source of the part of the key problem, is that people, and the closure of our newspapers. So many, we are so lucky to still have the Valley News in the Upper Valley. I love the Valley News, and they have worked really hard. Well, I do. They had a great piece on data privacy that Monique did this weekend. But if our public, and it's sort of slightly cyclical here. If our public education system is not supported, if we are not graduating people who are fully literate, who can read and create their own opinions after reading many sources, we are in deep trouble. Our democracy is in deep trouble. And this report just terrified me, because it was something like, it was less than 70% of the adults in America are literate. And I can't remember the exact percent, but it was just frightening. And that's the core of our problem, right there.
I think it's a core, if I may quickly.
Yeah.
I do a lot of communication strategy and workshops, and I can give you a couple of stats. The average U.S. reading level of adults is 6th grade.
Yeah.
If you were to take text put out by any government, take a town report and paste it into a reading level checker, which, by the way, takes about 2 seconds to do, it's probably at about the 14th grade level. So off the bat, most of what we are communicating is not accessible to anyone. The average person spends 9 seconds reading an email. It's partly time. So most of what we're putting out is never going to be seen by eyes. And part of it is educating people to do a better job, but part of it is putting out communications that actually will be accessible and will be read. And Joe, I hear you too. Actually, incidentally, I've spent hundreds of hours over the last years reading 1920s and 30s
Awesome.
newspapers.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to go back, and I see so many lessons there that I think we need to bring in today to how we do news and reinvest in these local newspapers that people will actually read. So, a small thing, I think it could be fascinating if you all put a column in the Valley News and the White
We
River
do.
Valley
I just
Herald.
put mine in last night. I send it to six papers. How many emails do I get from you who read it in the Randolph Herald?
I haven't seen it, I don't think.
No, I write them every 2 weeks. I have done it for 21 years. Or now in the Senate, 8 years. But it is shocking how few comments I get for all the columns I write.
Yeah. But I think there's a difference. I listened to a This American Life podcast recently that was introducing a newsletter a journalist has put out. It's called Tangle. And after being a journalist many years, he saw a challenge that people were flocking to their publications, and people are not reading both sides. So this is a daily newsletter.
They're
that
reading
comes
their
out.
lane.
He picks one issue, he summarizes what the left is saying and what the right is saying, so that you have it in one piece right there. And I think we need the local version of that. And I would highly recommend anybody actually check that out if you want to see.
So, somebody with time and staff can read all that.
Yeah.
But-
One
yeah.
bill.
We need to invest.
No, so there is, to your point, Rebecca, so one of the key places that we get a lot of really quality information, to shout out our local media, whoop whoop, that is all funded by kind of a precarious source, which is cable. There's a fee on cable providers that pays for all of like our local media, like Sapa TV, Jam, our lovely friends Orca in the back. All of that is paid by that fee. And that fee revenue, as we all have started to move off of cable, is going down. So one of the bills that I know Allison and I both have sponsored in the past and will be coming up again, is do we fund these local journalism sources, this media, this community engagement media, in another way? And one of the avenues we've talked about is a fee on large internet media providers like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime. So those debates are going to be happening, and I think we are going to have to really decide if we want to invest in these invaluable resources for both record keeping and providing up-to-date information. They go to all of our select board meetings, school board meetings, and it's very different to be able to go back. Like, I have had constituents come to me and say, someone said at a select board meeting that so-and-so is like terrible, terrible, terrible. Then I go and I watch the select board meeting, I go, I don't know if that's how I would have characterized that interaction, but the only way that you can get that factual based information is video recording or transcripts or good meeting notes. So I do think we're gonna have to debate how do we fund those sources of journalism at the local level. And then the only other thing I'll say is protecting journalists is going to be a big part of our job over the next 4 years, and making sure that journalists themselves as individuals are safe in their communities to do good investigative work. I still think about how at the federal level there are journalists who are being basically they're personally being attacked, which is not something that bodes well for democracy. So I am worried about that. But Kurt, you haven't been able to weigh in. The senators are chatty Cathys, so I don't want to.
I mean, I'm more interested in what, Dave, do you have more questions on that list?
Yeah.
I want to get to the questions, specifically.
This one kind of ties in a little bit with it. I'm going to ask the question, then I'm going to qualify. How many lobbyists are in Montpelier?
Oh, we have a whole book.
And I say that because you guys have testimony on a lot of bills and whatnot, but there are times when most people won't go. There are people who
Most people
really
what?
Won't go.
won't go.
Well, we have them by Zoom. We have one of the great things since
You know how
COVID.
people hate Zoom.
Doesn't matter. If you want to testify on something, people will Zoom in. And it's really one of the silver linings, one of the great aspects that has come out of COVID is that all our committee meetings are hybrid. You can watch every one of our committee meetings on YouTube.
Yeah.
And anyone in the state, travel is no longer an impediment to your being able to testify. If you live in Bennington, you can testify on an issue that you care passionately about and that the chair agrees that you can testify. You can testify. So I actually think it's been a great benefit to be able to have people testify from all over the state if they can't make it to the State House.
Well, okay, back to the lobbyists though. Those are people who are paid by some large corporation to feed you information.
Or small things. It's not all large corporations.
But they're feeding you their information.
Correct.
And it may not be right,
Right.
It may not.
but they are getting paid enough money to hammer it into you.
Well,
No, you're 100%. Wait, can we
Yeah.
just say you are 100% correct?
that
Be clear, we definitely have lobbyists, and the people we like, we call them advocates. So that's like you do have school system advocates or individuals for childcare. But I think if you is there a specific group you're concerned about? I'm most concerned about what we call shop lobbyists, who is one person who basically I wish they had a NASCAR jacket on the back because they represent like 20 different groups. And they might come and say to me, I feel strongly about this. And I'm like, well, are you talking out of your meta voice or are you talking out of your local school district voice? Like which angle are you coming
And
at
I guess
from?
that's my concern, is that because there are those two people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or they're two.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
It's scary, yeah.
You know, there are a lot of lobbyists and advocates, and actually, you know, and they're always throwing dinners and things for legislators, which I never go to because it feels slimy to me, honestly. But I do know a number of legislators that go to them all. You know, free dinner every night. But
Actually, they've cut way back
Yeah.
on dinners. We get breakfast now. And do you not take free coffee? Come on.
I don't drink coffee.
This is the scoop.
But you know, and so yes, they're there, and I mean, and there are absolutely times when, for example, in my committee, you know, someone will come up with a bill, and we will. And we're wondering about the ramifications on, you know, like what the federal banking regulations and stuff, and how those may or may not play into that bill. So we'll get, you know, the representative, you know, of the banking industry to come in, provide the information that we just don't know enough about. So there are those folks, but I think at least a good committee chair. I feel like I don't know all the committee chairs, but I feel like I get the best one. I've got Mike Marcotte. He's a Republican from Coventry, Vermont. And if you pronounce it Coventry, he will correct you. It's Coventry. And and you know, when we have an issue like right now, we have earned wage access, which is going to be an issue, and we which is sort of. It's an issue where people are borrowing money from the paycheck that they haven't gotten yet. But and so you know, we have the bill, and all the lobbyists representing those companies that are asking to be outside of the traditional regulation have come in, and they laid out their story. Then we had all the advocates on the other side come in and say why this is a very bad idea. Then we had the state administration people come in and say, what do you think? How does this fit into the thing? Then we and so I think a good chair tries to gather information from all those, because sometimes those lobbyists will tell you something that you didn't know that is actually a useful piece, and sometimes they'll tell you stuff that is also a useful piece for you to say, okay, I know you're lying to me, asked me about my data privacy conversation with one of their lobbyists sometime, and so you know, I think a good chair takes all that, and you take it all with a grain of salt, and then you talk to your constituents that may be affected, and you try and find the thing that is the truth and is the real answer that's in there. And so I don't think, I mean, I try to use the lobbyists and the advocates for what they're good for. And at no point do I ever believe that they're telling me the whole truth. My favorite story of Mike Marcotte is you do not want to play poker with this guy, because one of his strategies is a lobbyist will come in and they'll give their thing, and Mike will just sit there with his like dead face. And then the other side will come in and they'll give their side of the story, and it gives them the same. And I've watched both sides get really nervous, go out of the room, and come to a compromise, and then come back in. And so I think that's what a good chair tries to do, is to find that kind of place. And so I think there's a place for it.
I'm
Yeah.
enjoying this conversation, because I did not have much use for any lobbyists, because I unfortunately heard all the negative stuff. You know, my company wants this. It's not good for anybody, but my company wants
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We do have lobbyist disclosures. That's one thing that we and Senate GovOps are certainly interested in. We require that lobbyists tell us where you're from, who you work for, and we also have a little photo book. Because one of the things that can be confusing is you see somebody all the time, and you're like, are they a state employee? Are they a person who is a state rep that I don't know? Are they a lobbyist? So we have a lookbook that you can go through, but it doesn't give as much detailed information or disclosure as you might want. I also think financial disclosures are really important. For example, if I get a donation from an organization, you should know. Because if then I make a decision that benefits that organization or the people that organization represents, you can say, why did you do that? You know, as constituents. I
Well,
think those
all
things-
that is transparent.
Yeah,
To
so
go
you
to
can
the
see
transparency issue, that's all on the Secretary of State's website, as are all the people who are lobbying. And Dave, I don't disagree with you, but I actually think some lobbyists have some thoughtful points of view. It's your job to weigh them, and it's your job as a legislator to balance what everybody says, and then make up your own mind.
Yeah, that's good questions.
Allison, you just might want to do a time check. It's getting up on quarter.
Yes, I sadly have to scoot. Yeah, I hate to do that.
I'm just
but-
impressed we're all here
I
post
say
Super Bowl.
one more thing. I was reading the things that go on the wall,
Oh, the bills.
right around the time you guys started, and two of them caught my eye, and said, yes, but since then I've heard nothing about them. One of them was about a bill to make all ownership of illegal guns a felony, so that
I did
the
see
people who were picked up with an illegal gun, if it's only worth $899, it's a misdemeanor, so slap on the wrist, out you go. If it was a felony, it's like, okay, now we gotta talk about bail, you may have to go to jail. The other one was, we have talked to law
haven't
enforcement agent in this town, because we now are covered with Windsor County Sheriff's Department. We talked to them, we talked to some lawyers, nobody knows what to do for your own personal protection. There was a bill on the wall about making it a true castle state.
I haven't seen either of these
I'm
bills.
not sure I've seen these bills. If you could get us their numbers,
Yeah.
we can look at them.
I
I
must be on
haven't seen anything about either of these bills. So they may be House bills.
Did you say what a castle
probably
state
are.
is, though? I don't know.
I can protect myself in my house. You come to my house, you know, I can.
Yeah, that's not yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of that, but I mean, let's just look at those bills first before we respond.
But anyway, they were,
And like you said, it may be in a house, I'm not sure, and haven't
I'm not
gotten to
sure
the
whether it's
Senate.
in that.
Yeah.
But it came up on when Kirk gave me a site to go to, so I could start seeing some things.
Well, the legislative website, Dave, has all the bills that are introduced this session. But they're only live if they've been introduced
But
since
you
January.
should tell us if you see more, too.
Yeah.
So if it has an S, that means it's on our
Yeah.
side to start, and if it has an H, it's on their side.
Right.
But what's confusing is at any point, if that bill passes, it keeps its letter. So it could.
That's somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes a House and Senate will both basically have the same bill.
Yeah.
You know, and so they'll introduce it to both houses. So yeah, it can get confusing.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm retired to have time. You know, the person who's working 60, 70 hours a week, this is not available to them. They are feeding their family, they are sleeping, and they're working. And the hours that you can spend trying to keep up on this. I mean, you guys, that's your job.
Here, here.
Yeah.
Maybe we can't track all of it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Ah, good
Anything else?
That's it on my papers.
I had one other
Yes.
thing I
Yeah,
wanted to
yes.
mention, circling back to education. I'm sure you're already doing this to some extent, and Kirk, you mentioned having economic development involved in the school conversation. I wanna make sure that that decision-making process really includes all the factors in ways that this restructuring and the delivery impacts communities. And that it not just become a conversation about how to have shells of buildings that educate children at the most affordable cost, but really acknowledging what schools are to communities, what they do beyond just educating children, what it means for the economy, what it means for accessibility, what it means for whether kids are able to participate in activities or if they're too far away, and how community members can be involved, how schools are civic spaces and used by communities. You know, we're so lucky in our district here that our supervisory union and leaders have opened up the buildings to community use. You know, what is lost if we lose that or lose local control of it? So to me, there are just so many factors beyond the most immediate questions of education and funding.
Yeah, I so agree with that. I mean, you know, when I started thinking about running and just learning about our education system, and you know, and talking a little bit with Becca because she was on the transportation
Yeah.
alone
Right.
is an issue. I mean, that's why when you said 5, it's just that's untenable. Yeah,
That's administration only.
Yeah,
You
but
still
that
don't
could,
need building.
No,
that's what we don't know.
we don't know that. I mean, that may be school consolidation and things, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that hasn't been uncovered. So transportation. Also, one of the things I learned this from Representative Burrows, is that if a child in their formative years, in their elementary school years, learns closer to their home, their test scores, and they learn better if they're closer to their home than if they have to bus a certain number of, you know, an hour away or 40, which if you had 5 school districts, that's a distinct possibility in a rural state like we are in. So those types of things we have to consider. High schools, that may work, but in, you know, our elementary and schools, maybe not so much. So there's a chasm of things that we have to consider in this process.
And even our local area, like I said, I was on the school board for 13 years. I got out when we started consolidating, just got too much.
Sure.
But the school bus goes by my house at 6:30 in the morning.
Does.
School is at 8 or 8:30.
Yeah.
That bus is on the road 2 hours.
Wow.
So it's like crazy.
Mm.
And what we've done is luckily, between the Royalton and Seller, we kept our elementary schools, our K through 5 are in each town.
Yeah.
And they don't consolidate until they get into 6 through 9 and above.
Yeah.
But those children in Bethel, 6 miles from the school, are on that bus almost an hour before they get to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They stop in front of our house to pick up my nephew at 10 minutes to 7. Begin the school at 20 minutes to 8.
Just think of what all of that time that could be.
It's
Yeah,
too long
tough.
a day for a
Yes.
kindergarten.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they don't get home until almost 10 to 4.
Yeah, and if you add in, again, I mean, this, because my own committee, you know, with career and tech education, you know, we went to you know, because this consolidation question brings up, you know, already our career tech education system isn't working very well, and which is why a lot of schools are starting to add shop back in at the, you know, because the money follows the kid, and so the money goes to the tech center, not to the school, so the school's losing some money, so then they want that kid back, so they're having shop classes now back in, and you know, that whole system is kind of broken anyway, and this question of, you know, the kids having to be bused even more. We went and visited BFA Fairfax, I think it was BFA. It was one of the BFAs, might have been St. Albans actually, and they, you know, and we went to they have this beautiful tech center. It's state of the art, and you know, all this stuff, and they said it works great for the kids that live in St. Albans because they, you know, the school is right beside it, so they take their class and they walk over, and you know, and it works great. But they said kids that bus in from Bakersfield, whatever like that, first of all, you know, they're busing, they, you know, they basically their day's truncated.
Yeah.
Then they say even if like the kids in the construction classes, they want to send them out to a work site. Well, the kids get to the school at 8, right? They get them on the bus by like 9. They get to the work site by 9:30. They get their tools out by 10. They work till 11. Then they have to pack up their tools, get back on the bus to get back. And so they're like, they spend an hour actually doing the thing, and that doesn't work well. And so again, as we're trying to think about how we're going to configure schools that are actually going to work for the kids and work for the communities in which they are, it's a bigger conversation. And CTEs have historically been kind of neglected, and because it was the trades kids,
Yeah.
right? You know, and somebody pointed out, they said, back in their day, if you were in Votech, you walked down the hall, around the corner, down past the dumpster where the kids were smoking, and that's where they had the Votech Center, and everybody kind of knew, oh, it's the Votech kids, right? And that's no longer the way it is. Votech programs are highly valuable, and they're very profitable, and we need so many more of them that we need to break that negative image that we still sort of carry.
Electricians,
Oh, yeah.
plumbers,
Yeah.
construct,
Yeah.
I don't care how intelligent you are,
Out-of-body
if you don't have a
technicians.
place to go to the bathroom, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Especially in the Vermont area, because there's so few of them.
There's 13,
they're-
right?
Yeah,
I think there's 13.
really, I didn't know that. I mean, how much are you gonna make? Just from a annual salary, now is pretty amazing. So it is a tremendous profession.
A good tradesman
Yes.
is going to get out of trade school, and by the time the person gets out of college, he's already making more money
Yep.
than that person's gonna make. And I can't remember what the time is. It's like 50 years old before the guy who went to college, before he even comes close to the amount of money that
Yeah.
the plumber's making.
Okay, I'll-
Yeah.
Hey, I'm the daughter of
Yeah.
a plumber electrician.
Yeah.
I went to Hartford High School, and I did not go to the Votech school. And that's because my family had this stigma. Even my dad, he's very proud of his profession, but he was like, my daughter gets an indoor job, not an outdoor job.
Wow.
There's
you know what an
this.
electrician in Bethel, Vermont can get right now?
Oh, you can,
Scared.
the amount hourly, he's making more money than, he's not retiring. But that's the other issue is we have this huge generational
Yeah.
gap. And I don't think we've actually spent enough time collectively understanding the impacts of healthcare on these professions. Like the reason my dad was able to become a plumber and electrician freelancing it professionally was because he had VA health insurance. So a lot of our plumbers and electricians and tradespeople have the military healthcare structure to back their ability to do their work. So they don't need a direct employer. And now, my generation, you don't have as many folks who have VA benefits and we don't have universal health care. So you end up with a situation where they have to work for a company to be able to get those benefits that a other traditional job would get. So you don't have as many entrepreneurial, or you're a very small business and try getting health insurance for 4 people as a small business in Vermont. Like that's the most difficult group of people to insure. So I think health insurance, it does come back to that as well.
And another issue that arises, and we were just talking to advocates in our committee last week.
Non-lobbyist advocate.
That's how you don't like them.
They're still paid, but they aren't the ones that represent multiple organizations for the Associate General Contractors of Vermont. And they were talking about, and one of the big problems is because there aren't any kids, there aren't enough kids coming out of CTE programs and going into the trades, that people like yourself, Dave, when they got ready to retire, wanted to sell the business or give it to a kid or something like that. There was no one available. So they have no succession plan. And some of them, part of their retirement was built around the idea that I'm going to sell this business when I get to the end, and there's nobody wants to buy it. And so that's a whole issue that we're trying to look into, is how do we get those kids in there? How do we get that process moving? And then once they're in it, how do you get the financial literacy? How do you get all the training pieces for that person to know enough to take over your company? Because they might be great electricians, but they may not know how to how to, have a business
QuickBooks,
plan.
I mean, you have to learn QuickBooks to be,
Yeah, all that stuff. So those are all important issues.
I would add to that, agriculture and our farming industry. I mean, if it isn't a succession plan with their children, then there are issues to take it over. One of the things I want to do is see if we can add agriculture to our CTEs, and have that go forward. So.
Isn't it in most of them? It is up here, right?
It is not in. Actually, it is not in most. In some of them there are, but not in most. Yeah.
It's coming up on 9. I wanted to ask a follow-up question, something we actually discussed a lot last year. We talked a lot about the flooding in Montpelier and the mitigation efforts. And my question is really, whose plate is that on now? Is that a federal Corps of Engineers project? Is there someone in the state of Vermont who's responsible for that?
I'm happy to address the flooding related issues.
ahead.
As the co-chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus, I thought a lot of my job would be proactively responding to climate change, but lately it's been a lot of reacting to situations caused by increased natural disasters. So statewide, we had a FEMA declaration for the majority of our counties. There were 2 distinct floods that occurred. Summer and then in December of 2023, both got different types of FEMA declarations. And in Washington County, in particular, they got a lot of support, and they still have Doug Farnham, who is our chief recovery officer, who is designated to overlook both of those flood periods.
So he's a state.
He actually is in the agency of administration, and I would recommend, if we ever experience this again, that we do another recovery officer like that, because he's able to say, where's the federal money, where's the state money, where's the local support, and actually do some really detailed work to help communities get from the actual recovery immediate to where we are now. So I would say he's still employed. Doug Farnham is still our chief recovery officer, and I'm not sure if he has an ending timeline for when that goes away. For our area, I know a lot more about what's affected Windsor County than where Montpelier is at. But Windsor County, we still have 2 towns that are waiting for FEMA money that they were obligated, but they have not yet received. Like, we're talking millions of dollars that they've either already spent the money to do the work, or they're waiting to do work because they don't have the money yet. And that's disheartening. We're still experiencing that, but that's Bridgewater and Ludlow.
We're in the same boat here in Bethel.
Oh, you are?
That's right.
Are you still waiting for FEMA money?
Yeah.
Well, please reach out to us, because I've been on numerous email chains where I'm like, hey, just a reminder, like.
We just got some money, we just got an email from our town manager, we got some money for a 23 event.
Oh, you did?
Just got.
Yeah, well, that's where people are at. They're still waiting.
And we paid that and then paying interest on
Yeah.
the money.
Right. Okay.
And I would also say this with not knowing what's happening federally. It may be pushed back even more from the fact that they're trying to stop, any federal funding going forward, as well as get rid of FEMA. So there,
Back to your optimism.
I know what you're saying.
My
So-
concern above all that
Yeah.
is that the judiciary is going to be it's going to take 30 years to recover from changes to the judiciary. And so I think I'm more optimistic, certainly more optimistic than my husband, trust me. But I do worry about the impact that this administration is going to have on the judiciary and how many decades it's going to take to unwind that.
and that's absolutely fair. I'd like to think that those things are cyclical. And it's time and it's timing,
From Obama to Trump.
Yeah.
That's the
The arc of justice.
what
Yeah.
we're going to next. Is,
I've always thought that, in 2000, if we didn't have 2000 and Bush Gore and that go the way it did, we wouldn't have had Obama. And so things happen for a reason. that's probably why I'm optimistic, and that's probably why when, you know, I'm being a little political here, and I apologize. So I before I say what I'm about to say, I will say this. I sometimes I Google myself to see what comes up, and now it comes up politician, and I'm disgusted at myself. So I understand what you're saying. You know, I've done all this work in the business world, and I've been a politician for about 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden I'm a politician. But anyway,
Wikipedia.
yeah. But anyway, I just believe that, you know, we get through this stuff, you know, and I can't despair. We fight through, and you know what? We fight through, we fight harder, and the harder we fight, and then we get to the other side and we accomplish our goals, it makes us feel better because we had to fight through that than if it was just easy and get through and just, you know.
Yeah.
But on the flooding point, we did have a lot of benefits post Irene that I think we're also going to experience post this flooding, which is post Irene we did a massive amount of infrastructure improvement that if you look at our area, and I don't know how Bethel fared comparatively, but in Hartford, where we had flooding before, we didn't have flooding this time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we had larger culverts, we had the equipment needed, and I think...
You knew a different FEMA guy than we did, because it would not, if you had a 16-inch culvert,
Oh, they
you
made
put
you
a
do it again?
16-inch back.
Mm.
Three
Yeah.
floods up in Lilleysville area, somewhere up on that part of the town. Wash it up.
Yeah.
Finally, the guy who came along said, "Oh, this ain't working.
Yeah.
Why don't you put in a 2-foot culvert?" So we put in a 2-foot culvert. The last flood, it stayed.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But you know, this isn't a question for them, this is more a question for you. I saw in the newspaper that town of Bethel's paying like $900,000 to replace the Pinello Bridge to a house that no one lives in. It's a bridge that's basically someone's driveway over the Gilly Brook. No one lives in that house, and the town's gonna pay $900,000 to replace that bridge? And it happens all the time. So the Gilly Brook Road has washed out a number of times.
Stephenson Road, we plow the damn road every year.
And all those houses that are on the other side of the
Somebody's
bridge,
driveway.
all their driveways wash out, and then we're paying millions of dollars to replace that?
That
That's
was
not
a
okay with me.
very, very tough thing that the owner of that property.
run now.
No, this is, I the roads to me, these are literally what I live for. Like, this is...
That's just unacceptable to me, that's just down the house.
It's Gilead, bro?
Gilly Brook, no one lives there.
I know. And believe me, I know. The owner
No one lives there?
pushed to have that bridge put back.
Well,
So
I
they
would
could
too,
sell, so they
a
could
little bit.
sell the property. And the town was
But the
responsible.
bridge is worth 5 times what the house is worth.
I understand. But
It's
what's happened
ridiculous.
is just
Keep
like-
keep that thought. I want to thank you all. I appreciate it. I do. I want to thank you so much. Yes, absolutely.